All right, hey everybody. In this video, we are going to build our first Express server using the setup that I used in the previous video. So if you haven't watched that yet, go back, get your setup ready. Because in this one, we're going to get a server starting and cover a couple terms that I'm going to be talking about all throughout this course, and we'll need to know what they mean. All right, so if you recall, we set up our package JSON, we installed Express, we have our server.js file. You could also call it index.js or main.js or other conventions people use. I'm going to call it server just so it's really easy to see out here while we're learning. All right, so first things first, we've installed Express and we now need to use it. So what is that keyword in Node that I can use to import something? Well, what I will do is I'll declare a variable, call it Express, and set it equal to require. And now Express is not a module I wrote, so it's not going to be ./express.js. That's if it's a file I have here called Express. If it's in the Node modules folder, I just give the name of the installed package to require, and Node's required knows to go look in Node modules for Express and import the parts necessary and give it to us here. So that's all we need. First line, we import or require Express. Great. Second line, we now declare our server variable. A good convention for this is to call it app, and we'll set that equal to express with parentheses. Why we do it this way is express is given to us as the form of like a function. So we need to call that function, and it will return all the parts needed to be a server. So now app has everything from express it needs to be a server. Okay. One more thing we need to do. Servers, as we recall from the first and second video of the series, servers do two main jobs. They listen for requests from the client, and eventually they send up a response. So we need to tell our server to always be listening. And the way that we do that is at the bottom of our server file, is the convention I'll be using here, is I'll say app.listen. Now, .listen is a function given to us by Express, so our app or our server knows to be listening. Listen needs two arguments. The first argument is the port, and the second argument is just a callback function. So I'll say CB. So I'm going to put a port in here, and the number I'm going to choose is 9000. And then the callback function, we'll just use an anonymous fat arrow here, and we'll console.log the server is running on port 9000. The reason why we have this callback function is this will fire as soon as this is working, so we should see this console log in our console to let us know our server is working. We'll talk about ports here in just a moment, but let's get to it. Let's make this run. So I'm going to start this file up by using the node CLI. I'll say node server.js and hit enter. So maybe a little lackluster, but this is really a server. The bare minimum needed to get a server up and running using Express. As you can see, it's very declarative, very straightforward. How do we know the server is running? Well, one, I got this console, and then this console log, and also if I type anything down here, nothing happens. Why? Because this console is now running the server that's listening on port 9000, and it's going to keep listening. So anything I type in here, it's not going to take those commands because it's already got a job to do. And that's it. Now, granted, this is a worthless server. It doesn't do anything right now. I can't even make a request to it, but it is a server. So I'm going to stop it. I'm going to hit Control and hit C. That ends the process. I'll clear my terminal. And we have that server going. Great. Well, let's cover a couple of terms here so we can actually make the server do something. All right, so back to the notes. So we have some vocabulary in here, and let's start off with the port. So in your computer, you have thousands of these. Ports run processes. They can run servers. They can run programs. What we'll be doing is saying run my server on a local port. Your machine's referred to on your machine as localhost. So let's say my port was 9000. I could go to my web browser and type in the URL localhost:9000, and that would be hitting up my server running on my local port 9000. So you can really choose any port you'd like, but you want to stay above around 3000. Create React app runs on 3000, so I would suggest not using that one. And stay below 9000 or below. That's really the area you want to kind of stick in for this. Other than that, free game. Choose any number you want. I'm sticking to a nice whole number here, easy to remember. All right, so we got ports. So our server is running, in this case, it's running on port 9000. Great. Well, when our port is running, or when our server is running, we can create routes that handle specific endpoints. So these two words are pretty closely related. A route is like an event listener. Routes are said listen for a specific type of request like get, post, put, or delete. And it will get triggered in certain circumstances, but then we customize the route. We say don't listen to every GET request, listen to the GET requests that happen to /item or /user. Those parts, the /item or /user, these are examples of endpoints. So you see these all the time in the URL bar when you're visiting sites. So the endpoints is part of a URL. You may remember this from the HTTP course. Well, on the back end, we get to set these up like event listeners. We make a route, we say listen for GET requests at /item, and then if we sent a GET request to localhost 9000 /item, I would get back whatever that route was instructed to do. Okay, so with that terminology out of the way, let's build that. So I'm going to build our first route here, and we'll use our server variable for now to do that. So we'll say server listen for GET requests, so app.get, and if you're thinking of it right, all the other endpoints or the other methods are the same: app.put, app.post, app.delete. These words are consistent on the front and the back end, keeping it easy for us. We're just going to say listen for GET requests, and then the first argument, it is optional, but this is the endpoint. So argument 1 is the endpoint, also known as the mount path. So we're going to say listen for a GET request to /, and the second argument is the callback function. So we'll say comma, here's your callback function. Now, this callback function is extremely important in every single route we create. This is a route here. Every route we create will get this function, because what this function gives us is the request object and the response object. Now, if you think of the request-response cycle, that's what this is. So anything coming from the client, any request data, think post request, I'm sending you an object, that's going to be in here. Response, this is the server's object. The server can configure this and eventually send it back using this object, response. So very important to have both of these. Every route will have access to them. Now, we don't usually write the whole word in here. We usually hyphenate it as rec and res. So I'm going to keep using it as that. Just know this is request, this is response. So we're saying server listen for a GET request on port 9000 to /. You'll receive the request and response. And we're not going to worry about the request right now. We're just going to send a response. So using response, it has a .send method. And we're going to say hello world. All right, so very basic route, listening to / and sends back hello world. Well, now we need the server to run again. So I'm going to say node server.js, hit enter, and it's running. So now I can go over to my browser. I'm going to change this to localhost 9000 / and hit enter. And there we are. Did my first successful GET request to my own locally host server. And shortly you will as well if you're following along. Hopefully you got it. If not, keep doing it. You'll get it. So that is the very, very basics. Now I could edit this endpoint. I could say actually make it go to /user. And I'm going to go back to my window here and say /user. And I get this interesting message, cannot get to /user. So why is that? It worked to / and not to user. Well, fortunately, this isn't a problem with the programming. This is a problem with the server running on Node. When we started the server, it was running the instance that the code was at. I've changed the code now, but the server is still running that old server instance. So I need to stop the server, restart it, and now this code is being used I'll go to /user again, hit enter, and there we go. We got it. Okay, well, we won't usually just be sending strings, right? We'll be sending JSON. So let's actually send back an object here that has a name and an age. And we're going to stop and restart our server again. And now make this GET request to /user. Now, what's happened here? What data type do I have here versus what data type did I send here? Yeah, so this is the JavaScript object. This is the JSON object. So Express is doing something very nice for us. It is automatically stringifying our JavaScript into JSON in order to send it back to the client, much like Axios turns your objects into JSON to send it to the server. So an extra step taken out of the way for us. Now, if you're doing this on your computer, you might see something that looks like this. Still nice, but a little harder to read. This is a little bit easier. What I'm using right now is just a Chrome extension. If you go to the Chrome Web Store, there is an extension called the JSON Formatter. Once you install that, you'll see this little button appear anytime you receive JSON back from an endpoint, and it just makes it easier to look at in the browser. But we won't be using this a whole lot. We'll be doing this mostly in Postman, so we'll be ready for that. Okay, so just a quick recap here. We imported Express. We created our server calling Express. We told our server to listen on a specific port number. And then we created our first route that listens for GET requests to /user and uses the response object to call the .send method and send back a response to the client, making the request. What I would suggest you do is play with this, make different routes and such, different endpoints, and test that, sending different things, just getting used to this setup because you'll end up writing this all the time to set up your server and get going. All right, so that is what we needed to do to set up our first basic Express server. In the next episode, we'll add a little bit more to this to make it an easier experience. But good job, practice a bit, and join me when you're ready.